Hey, so welcome back, everyone. I wanted to take a little bit of a divergent path off of some of the videos that I've been creating lately to talk about how might we statements and the purpose of a how might we statement. And I'm really even thinking now how you might be able to craft these sorts of statements to create maybe like really meaningful, like high quality challenges and questions for your students to work on. And whether it be in a remote or a hybrid environment or even face to face, I think they can be really valuable. So I know I was first exposed to them when I started connecting with kind of design thinking as a process to allow students to identify opportunities and work through those challenges and problems and maybe use a really well-structured statement to guide their exploration of really interesting challenges. So here's the framework and the template you can see right here. So obviously a how might we statement, it implies there is no one particular right approach. There's solutions that students can come up with to address design challenges or design opportunities, and there is no one right way to do it. It also implies that they're obviously working collaboratively. So that's another kind of challenge that we'd have to determine on how we're going to solve that in a remote or a hybrid environment. But using tools like docs or slides or Jamboards or even something like Mural could be really helpful in solving those kinds of kind of just technical problems. But here's the framework. How might we, that's where the kind of the intention of your work goes. Four or two can go on the second line. So I know I have two listed right here, but oftentimes this could be four also as the kind of the target of your work. So the second line here would be who's the community that you're kind of solving with or identifying on behalf of, or who's the kind of target of the solution or the opportunity that you're addressing. By designing A, that's where the actual, the product, the solution, it doesn't have to be a physical kind of outcome. It can be, we're designing an experience, we're designing a process, we're designing a protocol. You can design anything you want. It doesn't have to be physical. That's maybe one of the perspectives that I'd like to eliminate by kind of talking through this video. Now, the fourth line here of with, this is what the constraints are, the materials, the time, the expertise, the apps, the whatever it is that you're going to use as the constraint. And we'll talk about how you can modify those along the way. And then the bottom line, this is interesting. I used to not use this line when I did this work myself, but I've added it. And the purpose here is like, what do you believe about this work? Why is this a compelling question? What do you think the opportunity is going to allow you to do? And we'll get to that in a moment. So let's jump to a kind of modified outline here of what this can look like. Let me just get myself out of the way. Okay, so how might we, what is the intention of your work? The top line is not what you're going to have the kids create. The top line is not the product they're going to make. It's what's the real purpose or target of their work. Things like bring awareness, demystify, bring happiness or joy. So what's the real purpose? Not the thing you're making. That's kind of like a symptom of the purpose or a manifestation of the purpose, but not the purpose of the work. The four is who's the audience that you're designing for? Like, who are you creating this solution for? Who are you working on behalf of? If we really think about a design thinking approach, who are you kind of developing and understanding and empathizing with in that first kind of entry level, that first work in design thinking that you're going to do the work on behalf of? Now we get to by designing. What is it that you're going to create? What are you asking kids to create? Now, when you're using this framework, let me back up one level. When you're using this framework, it doesn't mean that when you're crafting these questions, these design challenges, these how might we statements, that you have to fill in every line. That's where I think it gets really interesting. You might not fill in what you're asking kids to design, but you are filling in the intention of the work and who they're working with or on behalf of. Or you might say, I'm going to fill in the intention of the work. I'll let you pick the community that you'd like to work with. I'll let you design anything you want. But when we get to that fourth line of with, let's jump here, with the design constraints, the tools, the apps, the materials, you could even have a design constraint of the content area with your understanding of, and then you might have the content area you want them to explore. And then on that bottom line, this is what I believe that the student should fill in, or the person or the group kind of working on this design challenge. You know, if they're trying to bring joy for a particular audience or customer or community by designing, maybe they haven't decided yet because they haven't done the investigation or the empathy work to figure out what's going to bring joy to that community. Like, why do you believe that this community should experience joy? Or if we're demystifying an idea, or we're bringing awareness, or we're bringing clarity to a concept, why do we believe that that's so critical? So I would encourage you to maybe not fill that line in up front and have your students fill that line in. So now let's look at an example. What might this look like? I'm thinking of educators that I've worked with that are trying to figure out how can we, for example, increase collaboration. That's the real target of their work for our remote or virtual students, right? And I had Makerspace and Emily pull that out for our remote or virtual students. So we're going to try to explore what are ways that we can potentially increase collaboration by designing maybe we're designing let me pull this one that's been already dropped in. Maybe we're designing like who knows, a unit, an experience, how we're going to structure our live calls. Who knows what we're going to make, but we're targeting how can we create a more collaborative working environment for our remote or virtual students with that would be filled in by the end user. Like what materials do they have access to? What resources are they allowed to use? What tools or apps are they allowed to work with? Now, if you're creating the challenge and you know ahead of time, you might put those design constraints in there ahead of time. If you're working with your students, you might put the design constraints in there ahead of time of what tools or apps or materials that they have access to, materials in your physical space that they can create with. And then ultimately on the bottom line, like I said, whoever is engaged with the challenge, I think it's powerful for that user, the person engaged with solving this problem or identifying ways that they might address this opportunity of increasing collaboration. They'd have to fill that in. What do they believe about the power of increasing collaboration? Why do they believe it's a valuable target for this work? So I think then, once you're comfortable with the outline of what's going in each one of these lines, then once you develop comfort with it, you can create some really powerful challenges. How might we bring happiness to our fellow classmates by designing who knows what we're going to design? We don't have to prescribe that up front with, you might say, with cardboard, right? That's the design constraint, because the thing that they're going to make, it can be like the prototype they're going to make, the thing they're going to construct, it can represent the idea. It doesn't have to be a perfect working prototype. That prototype can represent what the ideal solution might look like in a physical form, which would allow for more conversation and more prototyping and more iteration. And then that bottom line, you would ask the students to fill this in. Why is bringing joy to their classmates so important? Or what is it about bringing joy or happiness to their classmates that's valuable? Why should they do that work? And they might identify because at a challenging time, bringing joy would allow students to feel a sense of calmness and happiness when they might be struggling with what's going on in the world, or working in a remote environment, or being distant is causing like challenges, and it's a really challenging scenario. So we want to bring joy to their life in any way we possibly can by designing something that's going to kind of like target that purpose. So this was kind of like a crash course in how we might be able to develop how might we statements. I hope this was helpful. I know it was a little bit of kind of divergent path, but all of this work is super important to me. And I think that we can use these frameworks to not only for ourselves, possibly to create design challenges around kind of what we'd like to see our students do. What kind of challenges can we pose to ourselves to maybe even redesign experiences for our students? But presenting those challenges to our students to have them do really kind of meaningful, high quality work. And you might use design thinking as a backbone to start to deal with these challenges or these kind of problems you're posing to them. Or we don't even have to really worry about that. We can just use this how might we framework to create really kind of open-ended, meaningful challenges for our students. And one idea that I mentioned earlier was you don't have to fill in all of these lines. You might fill in just the fourth line and say, here's the material constraint. I'd like you to kind of create the challenge or the opportunity that you'd like to engage with. Or here's the community. Or here's the curriculum area with our understanding of, and they can fill it in and figure out how can I use my understanding of that content area to do something for someone else. Bring awareness to, I always like joy and happiness. So there's certain top line ideas that I always land on. So I hope this was helpful. I hope you like the shift in the purpose of the videos. I'll be back to kind of some normal ed tech videos moving forward. But thanks for watching. Feel free to subscribe to the channel if you're finding these videos to be helpful, and I'll see you in the next walkthrough.